Okay, hey everybody. So today I want to talk about Rocket notebooks. Specifically because I did not have a great experience with them. I really thought that they were going to be something way better. You could really see my dedication to them because I have multiple sizes. One, like a smaller one for like just like little reminders and like to do stuff. And then I took this one to college, usually just taking little notes. And I had this bigger one, I think it was like a letter size one for essays, drafting work. And I liked the idea of it. I thought it was great, really. But over time, there's one thing that was just so bad, in my opinion, that I had to ultimately stop using these notebooks. Like, the overall thing is really the ink. I felt like specifically the ink had two main problems. One is that it was unreliable. When I say the ink is unreliable, I mean this in the sense that it smudges way too easily. And that's just a big problem for productivity. Like, I want to be able to write without that sense of worry kind of thing. I felt like I would write something down and go back to edit or just insert like a note that I thought of really quickly. And if I did this without proper timing, that would mean that I have to kind of really think it through. Like, one thing that would happen a lot is that if, say, I was just writing anything really, and I wanted to edit that work specifically by kind of just writing around it, putting maybe like a bracket or inserting some note, just very typical like editing stuff. I would find myself hesitating to do that, or at least having to wait or something like that, because I know the ink would smudge if I were to accidentally get my hand on the words. And that's just really weird to think about. Like, I felt like it was just ruining this productivity that was supposed to be happening, just because the ink was just not reliable. It just wouldn't be ready for me to work with, and it was such an odd experience. Like, one thing I would have to worry about is like my hand placement. Like, if I did want to go immediately back to edit something, like, I would twist up my hand like that and try not to mess with it. That's a weird experience. I don't think that should be happening when you're just trying to write something down. And in another sense, it's unreliable because it doesn't always mark the page when you expect it to. Ink should just automatically get on the page. Like that should be an obvious, but for whatever reason, this ink just does not do that. In fact, I was looking through this notebook that I recently got, and I'll put it on the screen. One thing that happens specifically is that you'll write something and immediately have to rewrite that same thing because it's a little light, or like the ink isn't as like consistent. It'll go from like bold to dim very quickly. And that happened recently when I was just testing them out just for like the sake of this video, and I would see that the ink just would completely not write. You get the most faint kind of scribble on there, but I feel like sometimes that wasn't even the ink, it was just like the pressure of the pen itself. Like, that's just how bad it was. It was such an odd thing. And what makes it even worse is that you really do expect the ink to just work, because if you look at the ink itself, like if you put up to a light, I'll show it in this video. Like, hopefully it shows. I haven't recorded that part yet, but if you put the ink to the light, you'll see that the whole I guess cartridge is what you call it, it's full, right? And yet nothing is nothing is being written on paper, even if you're using the ink. And that happened a lot, and that was very weird. I know for some reason one thing they say is to like put the ink in the fridge and then that should help things out. I don't know, that's like an extra step for like no reason. Other inks just don't have that problem, and I just don't find that acceptable. And one thing, and this is kind of like a pretty big problem, is that I would find that the ink is almost too liquidy. And really for me, this created a lot of anxiety when using the work, because I knew that if I could see how liquidy it was, I couldn't flip to the other page. Like, it just wasn't an option for me in that moment. Like, I would actually have to wait to go on. Like, I write a lot. Like, most of it, fine. It's nonsense, right? But it's because I'm just brainstorming. I'm just trying to figure out my ideas. I don't have everything coherently figured out when I first start writing. And this just added like a limit to my writing. Like, I couldn't just keep going. I feel like I always had to pause and wait for it to like dry out so that I could turn to the next page. And yeah, that I was more often than not, I feel like I was kind of annoyed by this process. And the second thing about the whole it being too liquidy is that it makes the text harder to read. Like, my writing would reflect the light, and what that would mean is that it turns kind of like a white kind of thing, right? It's like the interaction is creating this sort of problem where it's like the white light will reflect on it, and because it is white, that means that it will start to blend in with the page. It kind of camouflages. This wouldn't happen too often, but definitely enough times where I'm like, wow, this is really just getting in the way of my workflow. Like, there is no flow going on because I'm worried about not being able to read the ink in specific lighting angles. And that was just weird to me. And ultimately, I just had to give it up. I'm no longer using these notebooks. I don't want to throw them away. For some reason, I'm like kind of a hoarder. I've been keeping it in my closet. And I've just switched to just regular old paper. You know, got some notebooks recently. And, you know, just have like a whole bunch of loose leaf paper that I work with often. But it's upsetting. You know, I like the whole idea of like just scanning the page and like having, especially multiple kind of like easy to access like profiles kind of thing. And now I don't do that. I open up OneNote and go to wherever worked first, and just use my phone and scan the document there. And yeah, it works pretty nice. And I'm glad that I just don't have to worry about bad ink. Like, I use like G2 refills or like a Schmidt fine liner, which is just, if you haven't used that, strongly recommend. So bold and like consistent, and it's such a sharp contrast to the ink that you're supposed to use for these notebooks. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that I've kind of let these go. But what do you think? Have you guys used the Rocket notebooks? What do you think about them? Do you find that you've had similar like annoyances with these kind of books, or what? Just tell me what you think about my views. Well, that's all I have to say. Have a good one.